Hi, I'm Stephanie Carpenter, and I'm the program officer here at the Hamilton Wood Type and Printing Museum in Two Rivers, Wisconsin. And today I'm going to talk about how I create a letterpress print from the very beginning through the finished product. And so, one of the really exciting things at Hamilton is we have the largest collection of wood type in the country. And we can print with it, we do workshops, we do prints for the store. And so I think it'll be fun to kind of look at some of the prints I've created to talk to you about how I think about that process before we actually get into it. So we can look at these prints. These are just some of the ones I created for the store here at Hamilton. It's really exciting because when we create prints, we're often looking at what we have in the collection. And so one of the things we have in the collection is type. So often we'll do these specimen sheets, but it's really fun to think about how to do a specimen sheet that isn't traditionally what you think. It's just A through Z from beginning to end, top to bottom. So these we were partnering with Appleton Coated at the time. So we wanted to show off the paper, which is really fun and tactile. And you get some really nice textures in there. And then also by using it, you could get some really nice see-through on the ink by using transparent neon colors here. And so it was really fun to think about like using the paper in its best way. Like how can my letterpress print actually show off the type in our collection and use the paper to its fullest extent. And so knowing what your surface is going to be is really important because it can help you determine kind of what direction you're going to go when you start designing. Also, it's really fun because we can use things in the collections in non-traditional ways. So even though the Hamilton company, the Hamilton Manufacturing Company, has been around since 1880, and that's where this Good Woods description came from, Good Woods, Wood Goods. We also, as a museum, we've been around for 21 years, and we still use the pantograph to make wood type today, but we are looking at how we can use historic things in new ways. We know there's been a really long history of how letterpress printing has been used in the commercial industry. So it was used to print newspapers and billboards and books. But now it's an art form. So how can we use kind of fun, exploratory ways to use that type that was historically used one way, but now can become a piece of art? But I'm going to talk about that whole process of how would I think about doing something like this from beginning to end. And so that's what I'm going to share. The letterpress printing process, as well as some kind of non-traditional ways to print. I quite like to explore with bringing texture into my work, and I like to see how we can use these presses in these processes in new and exciting ways. Today we're going to print a saying that we have here at Hamilton that we talk about like how people can experience it, and it's visit, learn, print, repeat. And it's this idea that you can come back over and over again, explore what we have at the museum, and there's always something new to learn, and there's always something to get your hands on. So that's what we're going to print today, and we're going to work within this constraint. So one of the things I think about often is what's the size of my paper, because that really allows me to think about what type I'm going to pull or what images I'm going to bring out or what's going to work when I get that final print. So I always have my trusty line gauge in my pocket, and it allows me to measure and see what the size is going to be. When I start to pull my type, I then know if I can go 40 pica type or if I have to go 4 pica type. Does it mean I can do really tall pieces, or can I go really wide? And that piece of paper allows me to know where I'm going to move as I start to work forward. So we've got our line gauge, we've got our galley, and now I think it's time to go pull some type. So I like this Gothic quite a bit, but I think I'm gonna have to pull the bottom drawer out halfway. That way this one can sit on top so I can get deeper back into this case. So now we can start to pull the type. Looks like it has all the letters I need. That's always, part of the hunt is, does the style I like actually have all the letter forms that are going to be needed for my print? Yeah, I think that'll work okay. So it's always important for you to write down where you found your type, because that way later you can put it back in the same spot. So we've got these type sign-in sheets that we always make sure we use when we start to pull type in the collection here at Hamilton. So now that I've pulled some type, I might still need to get more, but I wanted to start to see how everything would work if I brought it over and started to lay it out actually on my paper. Like, what's gonna work, what's gonna happen. I also, after seeing those prints from earlier, I thought, oh, it'd be kind of fun to have a big half round. And what I start to find when I pull type is I'm like, well, I want this to overlap that. And so the way that I do my mock-up so I can start to see if it's actually going to print correctly, if I'm going to like visually how it's going to look, is I print on tracing paper. And so starting this process now allows me to have kind of a small visual idea of how those layers are going to go. And then I know the next part I'm going to do is I'm going to go proof all of this in black ink on tracing paper. But right now I can start to play and say, like, I can start to make some decisions. I pulled this 40-line Gothic that I really like. It's kind of condensed, which means I can go really tall, but still get it to fit on my print. And then even here, I was looking at arts, which is part of our type legacy program that we did with Eric Spiekerman. He designed this, and he did alternate characters. So I could have this really nice wide E in there, or I could just have one. So that's kind of the fun I get to do with playing with this, is seeing what's going to work. So I brought my type over, and I've got some designs. I've got some words that are in 2 different styles, and that's because I'm still making that decision, and this is a good time to proof it, because then I can see what's going to work for me. This proof is going to be quick, it's going to be dirty. I just want to be able to visually see how these elements are going to work together when I finally get them laid out in the final layout process. So I'm working on these proof presses, these show card presses that we have in the classroom at Hamilton, and that's because they're nice, they're easy, they're good for a quick print. In fact, it's really nice because we can use magnets to lock the type up. So when I go to the final print, I'm going to, of course, lay it out and use coins, but this can be a really nice, quick way. I'll do some furniture to get my form set, and then I'll just use magnets to hold everything in place so nothing gets hurt. I think I'm going to do this in 2 runs. I'm going to do the type first, and then I'm going to do all those visual elements, because I don't quite know what I want, like borders and wood type ornaments, what other parts and pieces I want to have on my design yet. So I always measure my longest line. This is 58. I know I'm going to go 60 for the final. So just to get a quick proof, I'm just going to go 60 all the way down, and that way I'm good to go. So I'm going to pull some furniture now. At the furniture cabinet, like I said, it's 60. We don't quite have a bunch of 3s, so I'm going to just grab some. I think 3 picas between each is nice, because then I have space to work around when I finally maybe need to cut this out. So I'm pulling it away from the head of the press a little bit, so I've got some space there for my paper to get fed into the grippers. And then the rest of them, we're just going to do 3 picas. That way I've got the same amount of space between each. This doesn't determine the final leading in my design, but it gives me some space. I need 1 more just to fit underneath this piece here. And now I get to use those magnets and get those all held into place. What I'm doing is I'm putting it at the ends of the lines, because I don't want the type to move on me while I'm doing the proof. I'm not even really determining the kerning of my letter forms or the tracking. That I can do later. This is just a proof to kind of see how it's laid out. So now that I've determined that nothing is going to move on me, I'm ready to get my ink out, and then I'm ready to to proof this onto tracing paper. This is a bit big, but it will give me a proof so that I can see what my type is looking like. One of the reasons I like to use a press like this is that I can easily get that paper into those grippers. I can get it down, and then I can pull this across. And with a Vandercook, I would have to do a lot of make ready. With using this show card, I can very quickly burnish the back of the print to get every little bit and make sure that I have a nice image of that type that I can then start to see as I lay it out. So it's not a great proof for seeing what's ready to print, but for a nice quick proof of seeing what the type looks like, it works really well. So now I need to proof my half round, because that's one more layer that I'm going to do. This is when the magnets on these presses come in very handy. And I'm going to show you a different way that I proof, which is to actually use carbon paper, because sometimes I might be working on 3 things at once and I don't have time to get ink out, but I still need a proof to see what things are looking like. And this would work with type or imagery or ornaments. It doesn't matter. It just happens to be a half round today. So I've got some carbon paper here, and you just need to put that over the top with the carbon facing up, because we're still going to put the paper on top. So it'll be your element that you need to proof, it'll be the carbon paper, and then it will be your tracing paper on top. And you just want to make sure that the carbon on the carbon paper makes contact with the tracing paper so it comes off. So then you roll that across and you have a carbon paper proof. And that means I don't have to get ink out and get inky if I'm in a hurry to get a proof. Sometimes I don't have a press and I can't actually do the work on one of the show card presses, and I still need a proof because I need to get a design done. So what I'll do is I'll do a quick lock up in a galley so that I have all of my type, I have all of my elements, but I just do a quick proof of it. So I've got an inky brayer here. So I'm still using the ink to get the imagery. But I'm not reliant on having a press available, and I'm not reliant on doing the make ready. This is a really, really nice, quick, easy way. If I need that design, and then I just burnish the whole thing. Because then I still have what might not be as dark of a proof, but I still have a proof. I still have the type. I can now bring it digitally or cut it out and use it. So once I have everything proofed, then I'm ready to cut all those elements out and then actually bring them onto my paper so I can see where they're gonna sit on my design. So I've got my piece. Sometimes I use scissors, sometimes I sit down with an X-Acto knife and actually cut them out. It depends on how repetitive my design is and what's easier. So we'll get one piece done. And it's nice because now we can start to lay it out where we want it to be here on this element. but much easier when I already have them all cut out. So that's what we're going to use. And this is where I can now start to bring my elements into my design. And I liked that big learn, and I liked visit. This is also really nice because all of my elements are now right reading. Also, I need to think about how am I going to do either my tracking or my letting or my kerning. So this is a really good point where you can start to cut these out. So I might say, well, I want to track this whole line out. But visually, I want to be able to see that. And it's really nice because I know I'm going to have the same baseline when I get back onto the press. That's all going to stay in its place. But I have some control of knowing where these elements are going to sit as I bring them in. And remember, we've got this great big half round, which visually on here might look kind of tough, but it allows me to see kind of where that placement's going to hit as I bring my design together. And, you know, if I start to bring this element over both the learn, which is run 1, and my half round, which is run 2, if I start to overlap this border, I now automatically know that I've gone into a third run. And that means I'm going to be on press longer, because depending on how big each edition is, you know, it could be a whole nother day on press. One of the things I like to do is I like to explore with monoprinting, or I like to explore with getting different textures on paper, because it's really nice to have different, like, kind of artist proofs or playful prints or unique prints. And so I sometimes do it on press, and sometimes I do it with found objects. So I'm going to show you both today. There are some things that I like to collect before I get started. One is I like to have a scrap piece of paper. It literally could be anything. It could be newsprint, it could be anything cheap that you have a lot of. It's best to have text weight paper because it's thin and it'll be able to pick up more of that texture as you work. So this is the paper I plan to use the print on. And so I'm gonna have a whole stack of that so that as I go and find designs, I can kind of play and make lots of them. I've got my ink, and then I've got my station that I just always come back to. So even though I'm going to explore and look at lots of different locations for interesting textures, I'm always going to come back here to get my brayer inky. So okay, so we are ready to explore. We've got some paper, we've got our scrap, we've got our inky brayer. It's time to go looking for interesting textures. So when I want to collect these patterns, I look all over the museum for interesting textures, but I often start right here in the press room because there's so many interesting patterns and I'm already working in this area. So here in the press room, we have these really lovely anti-fatigue mats, but I just love the kind of circular pattern that's on there. And this is why your scrap piece of paper becomes so important, is because putting that on this very dirty mat allows you to put your clean piece of paper on top, and that way, when you actually get the print, your piece of paper doesn't get any dirt on the back of it, but it still allows you to get that texture. So then I just make sure to hold the piece of paper, and then I roll my brayer across. So that's one print, but I think let's do a couple. It's really nice to see what happens when there's less ink on each piece. So we just get another piece of paper, put it right in the same spot if we want, or move it around. In fact, we could even start to play with which way those patterns go. Pull this across. And I think I'll do one more. And then we can look at these pieces and see how each one is slightly different. And it's really great because we could print over the top of these, or we could draw on top of them. and we can make different prints with each one. And you can see where there's really heavier ink on this one, and then it gets lighter as you go along. So I've got all of my tracing paper mock-up pieces laid out on my sheet where I want them. So now it's time to take all of my blocks and actually get them in the press and get it all locked up so I can make some prints. And because we did that whole process where we played with the type at the beginning and then we did proofs with the tracing paper, once we finally got onto press and was ready to do the run, it was that much quicker. The lockup didn't take as long because we had a really nice kind of roadmap that allowed us to know where we were going. And I could always make changes on press. I could make designs as I was working. I could make design changes, but having that plan allowed me to very quickly move through the process and get printing, which is really exciting. So we've got our layer. We can go through, we can add 2 or 3 other design elements, right? We could do a whole nother run with just this beginning print. We can also do some really fun things because we have those textures that we took already. We've let those dry, and now we can print over those and add another layer. And so this can be really fun because you can add more color kind of quickly and easily. Each print can be unique, and you can start to see where it hits in different ways or adds a lot more depth to your piece. So I highly recommend that you start to explore what's possible on press and off press, and that you really have some fun with it.